Reptilian shapeshifters are behind ISIS, the Federal Reserve and Sesame Street. This is the False Flag Nation podcast.
And welcome back to another episode of the False Flag Nation podcast, where we delve into conspiracy theories, the occult, and all things esoteric. This is your host, Joe DeMarco. Joining me, as always, is my co-host, Mr. William Revere.
How you doing, guys?
This week, we got a interesting show for you, dealing with the concepts of biological warfare and how that relates to disease epidemics which have broken out over the last few decades, including the current scare, Zika virus, which is, according to the media, ravaging South America and apparently linked to the microcephaly or tiny heads birth defects, which we've been seeing in Brazil. It's over 3,000 cases so far. And many have speculated this is linked to the New World Order population reduction agenda. But before we get into that, we're going to be talking about earlier pandemics like Lyme Disease and West Nile, and what the common threads between all these different pandemics are. So,
yeah, this is going to be a good show. This is going to be action-packed and definitely relevant today. Because, as you will see, things like West Nile virus, which, were deadly but not pandemic level, I think we're just kind of stepping stones for what's to come, if you will. So,
Sure. Well, I think the good way to start this off would be sharing with you a story from my personal life, because this is an issue that seems to have touched me, although unknowingly. I didn't realize I had apparently contracted Lyme disease several years ago and didn't realize it.
This was after your first encounter, sexual encounter with a Lyme, right?
Yes, with a citrus fruit.
Yes.
It is a sexually transmitted disease. It is citrus fruits, no matter how enticing, are not meant for penetration or insertion. So, as tempting as that pomelo might be, I think you should refrain. But I had some blood work done in fall of last year and got a call from my doctor saying that I had tested positive for Lyme disease antibodies, like very high levels. And he had said, I've only seen a couple people with levels this high. And I was very surprised because I was tired a lot, but I had attributed this to just not getting enough sleep and working a lot of hours. And he put me on some hardcore antibiotics. It was like 4 times the normal level someone takes. So much so that when I went to a regular infectious disease specialist, he actually thought it was overkill and he declined to treat me because he thought it would just be going too far.
Wow.
But, I do have somewhat more energy afterwards. Taking antibiotics for a long time has problems of its own, but one of the purported side effects of Lyme disease is constant fatigue, and as well as confusion, muscle soreness, lack of decline in cognitive function, and those are. I really did not experience any of those, which is why I was so surprised to hear this. But Lyme disease,
you can even go blind as well.
Yes, and I had problems with my vision in one of my eyes, but that apparently was unrelated. It was linked to inflammation in my retina, but according to the doctors I've been seeing on and off. But Lyme disease, it's not too surprising that I could have gotten it because I was living in Connecticut at the time, only a few towns away from where the disease first was discovered in the mid-70s, Old Lyme, Connecticut.
Right.
And what's unique about Old Lyme, Connecticut, Will? What is close to that?
Well, right off the tip of Long Island, Montauk, is a smaller island, which is known as Plum Island. And this is probably about 10 to 13 miles away from the Connecticut shoreline and very close to the Old Lyme area. And what's interesting about Plum Island is that it was, and up until recently was, a government-owned research facility for infectious diseases and also experimental research involving animals and viruses. So one of the things that has been proven, this is not a conspiracy theory, this is not a bunch of wackos with tinfoil hats talking about, but there is some connection to Lyme disease and the activities that took place on Plum Island.
Yeah, they have admitted that they studied the disease there, but they're denying they caused it. The speculation is that this island, for decades, they've been conducting experiments and research on diseases, specifically things like foot and mouth disease, experimenting on animals, and the theory was that Lyme disease was a biological weapon that had been tested on this island and was released either accidentally or intentionally into the Connecticut shoreline and infected people in that town, and it spread out from there. And to this day, the highest concentration of Lyme disease is in southern Connecticut on that shoreline, that general vicinity. And interesting thing about Lyme specifically, we'll get into the other things they study on that island and controversies there, that Lyme is caused by a type of bacteria, which over the course of my research, it was proven that Japanese scientists who committed all kinds of war crimes and experiments on humans had been experimenting with this same bacteria on prisoners of war during World War II.
Wow.
I'm going to see if I can get up on the screen the specific type of bacteria that is. But yeah, it's well known that as part of the truce following, or part of the surrender of Japan following World War II, General MacArthur granted pardons to some of the scientists from these organizations like Unit 751 that committed all these atrocities in exchange for their findings from their research. So they reaped the benefit of that without having to do the research itself. At least that's the official story. The goings-on at Plum Island seem to suggest they continued the research anyway afterward.
And there's also another World War II connection there as well. The widely known Operation Paperclip, which was an operation after World War II, which granted these same kind of pardons, if you will, to top-level German scientists in the Nazi Party, and basically gave them employment contracts and pardons for their war crimes to work for the United States government. Because let's not forget, prior to the outbreak of World War II, Germany was, a top enlightened country in Europe. They were scientifically above and beyond most other European countries. They had top-level, highly educated individuals in the scientific areas. And part of the reason why the United States involved themselves with Operation Paperclip was to deny Russia the ability to take these top-level scientists from Germany and use them to advance their bioweapons experiments.
Absolutely.
So, basically, the U.S. was hedging their bets against Russia and, granting freedom to these war criminals and bringing them to the United States, employing them, and letting them live out the rest of their lives.
Yeah, they didn't have to answer for any of the crimes they may have committed, whether it's experimenting on people in concentration camps or on the Japanese side and the medical, scientific facilities where they experimented on Korean and Chinese prisoners. It looks like the bacteria is the Borrelia mayani bacteria, and there are documents from the World War II era in Japanese where they were using this bacteria to experiment on people. And what a coincidence, a couple decades later, a disease caused by this bacteria suddenly appears in the region surrounding Plum Island. And we know for a fact the government had possession of the research done by these scientists in the Pacific. And then getting back to the Nazi side of this, some of those scientists brought over, like you said, in Operation Paperclip, specialized in bioweapons research. The more famous ones seem to have gone into aerospace, like the space program, NASA, all that. But there were a lot. There were over 2,000 people brought here. Most of them.
That's just incredible.
Yeah, you have the guy from NASA. Why am I forgetting his name? Like a household name. Werner von Braun is a household name.
Right, the V2 rocket.
Yeah, all that. He's pretty famous. But most of those people were just working low-key jobs, but working on very important, sensitive stuff, which had huge ramifications for the future. One of those people was a guy named Erich Traub, who it seems worked directly under Hitler, but was brought here as part of that Operation Paperclip by the OSS, the precursor to the CIA. And his expertise was infecting ticks and mosquitoes with biological germs.
So right there, I mean, this is incredible. Lyme disease, which is originating in Connecticut, Old Lyme, you have a direct connection between Nazi bioweapon research and even more specifically tick virus research. And I mean, what's fascinating to me is that you could very well be a result, your Lyme disease could be a result of the United States bringing over Nazi war criminals and taking advantage of their knowledge. And I mean, this is just insane.
Yeah.
I mean, what's the point here? That's what I'm getting at. I mean, was Lyme disease was this a population control idea, or was this just some kind of experiment gone wrong?
It seems like this was just an attempt to develop a biological weapon in the form of a disease, a pandemic, that would evade detection. Because one of the things about Lyme is that it can be misdiagnosed as many different things, because it has all these kind of vague, confusing symptoms like just fatigue, muscle sore. There's all kinds of things that could cause the things I described just now. But if a enemy nation was hit with that, they'd never know what hit them. The doctors would misdiagnose it. They wouldn't know how to treat it. It would spread very quickly. But as a biological weapon goes, it seems to be debilitating but not lethal. It doesn't seem. To my knowledge, there's no account of anyone dying from Lyme disease. But it seems like it was, like you said, an experiment that was partially successful, but it hasn't really been weaponized. And you could just write this whole Lyme thing off as a fluke if that was the only disease that had broken out in the Plum Island region, but it's not. You had the Dutch duck plague about 10 years earlier in the 60s, and then much more recently you had West Nile virus around 1999 that started popping up all over the place in Connecticut, and that's caused by mosquitoes rather than by ticks.
Right.
And that seems to spread much more quickly because mosquitoes are airborne. They can bite multiple people. Ticks, you kind of have to go into their environment, into the woods, tall grass, in order to be exposed to that. But, it's
to me, the whole idea of weaponizing mosquitoes is terrifying because that's one of those things that even now, the number one rate of the number one killer in these African nations is diseases like malaria.
Yeah.
And you can see how fucking brutal it is on these communities that aren't protected. And, imagine setting loose, 50 million contaminated mosquitoes into different countries. There's really no defense for it. Stuff like DEET and all these different chemicals that are supposed to prevent mosquitoes and all the Citarella or candles and all that kind of shit. It never works. Anybody who's been outside knows that the mosquitoes are not repelled by any of this stuff. So the idea that, you could potentially die from a mosquito bite is terrifying.
Yeah, and it looks like mosquitoes have actually been weaponized against other mosquitoes, and that's we're going to get into that pretty soon when we talk about Zika. But going back to Plum Island, the interesting thing about this is that their cover story for decades was that this was they admitted it was a research facility owned by the Department of Agriculture for the purpose of studying things like foot and mouth disease and, interestingly, anthrax, which reappeared around 9/11. And foot and mouth disease was a huge problem. It was eliminated in the late 20s, the 20th century, and largely eliminated around that time. And the explanation for why the Department of Agriculture had this facility is, we need to protect our nation's food supply and we're against Soviet sabotage and things like that. But while all those years while the Department of Agriculture is running it, you have all these outbreaks going on. Then 9/11 happens, and interestingly, who takes it over? The Department of Homeland Security.
Yep.
Runs that island now, and they began studying anthrax again there, presumably to make some sort of vaccine against it. I don't know.
Right, because that was a big potential threat.
Yeah,
after the
handful of people receive. Tom Daschle gets an envelope with some stupid powder in it and crushed up Mentos, whatever it was, and they, suddenly they're full steam ahead researching this again. Other things that have been linked to Plum Island are animal experimentation. You've heard of the Montauk monster?
Yes, that was 2010, I believe, right?
2008.
2008?
This,
okay.
Mysterious creature washes ashore on Long Island in Montauk. And if this picture has been going around for a long time, you may have seen it.
Right.
But it looks like, at first glance, it looks like a pig or a dog, but it has this sort of beak-like snout at the end, and then sharp. It has like a sort of bird of prey's beak on the top of its mouth, and then the lower jaw has teeth on it, though.
Wow.
So it doesn't look like any sort of living animal that people know about. And various explanations were given that it was a sea turtle without its shell. That doesn't make any sense because a turtle's shell is fused to its spine and it can't be removed.
Right, and I don't think there's sea turtles on Montauk. That doesn't really make sense.
They do swim up there, but they don't come onto the beach.
Yeah.
But another explanation was that it was a dog. The most recent dismissal of it was that it was a raccoon. Had been, yeah, it had just been floating in the sea, and its fur came off, and it was bloated and decomposed, and that's why it looked all strange like that.
Yeah.
But its paws are kind of cloven.
Right. So you've got this pig-bird hybrid.
Yeah, it looks like one of these creatures from Half-Life, where this pig, this little pig demon ass baby thing that washes up on the, like those things that sent the shock waves out at you in the original Half-Life.
Yes.
It washes ashore on the beach. No one has any idea what the hell it is. It's whisked away to a vet somewhere, where they give some press conference about what they think it is, and then that's the end of it. No one ever sees it again. And then another monster washes up under the Brooklyn Bridge in 2012. And
wow.
This one was dismissed as a raccoon as well. But this one's even freakier looking, and has this, it really looks like a pig, but its face looks like, its mouth almost looks like a lamprey or something. It has this giant mouth with teeth sticking out. It looks,
oh, shit.
Yeah, it looks like a pig where its snout had been rolled back, and it has like piranha fangs there. It's very, very bizarre looking.
So what's the thought here in the community? What is this? What's going on? Is this essentially United States government crossbreeding animals? And we've seen this before. We've seen kind of hybrids be mixed, but never different types of mammals being crossbred.
Well, it looks.
And I know that, basic biology 101, if you go back and study that, there's the different levels at which different breeds of animals will not be able to crossbreed. And I forget exactly what it is, but I do remember this one thing from Bio 101 is that there's like 9 levels at which the result of which will not be a offspring for
Sure.
two different types of competing mammals. So.
Yeah, because the genes are too different. What this
Right.
reminds me of is kind of like what Monsanto does with GMO crops, where they create these transgenic species which ordinarily would not be able to reproduce with each other because the reproductive organs are incompatible with one another, but by just splicing the gene into the genome of another species, they can create these chimeras which would never occur in nature normally. And it looks like that may be what's going on Plum Island, where they're creating these chimera animals instead of plants, which would never be able to reproduce normally because they're too genetically dissimilar.
Right.
But because they're taking this genetic manipulation to a whole other level, they can create these freaks in the laboratory, and it's like some of them end up washing ashore on the mainland. I've read reports that these creatures are allowed to graze and just wander around the island to observe their behavior, and they periodically will release diseases and expose them to see how they react. This
really?
is, that could lend credence to the official explanation that they're testing to ensure against outbreaks of disease in livestock. But who knows what they're concealing there? There's dozens of laboratories on that island. The island has its own fire department. There's people living there year round,
wow.
experimenting there, and it's. I have a feeling there's far more going on there than what has managed to leak out to the mainstream media. This is just the old cliched expression, tip of the iceberg. I think that's really all we have here. There could be all manner of experimentation and crimes against nature taking place on this island.
Right, and like we said previously, this isn't conspiracy theory stuff. This isn't a bunch of wackos making statements without any fact behind them. the facts are that this is a United States government-owned island, and there were research projects going on here with high-level scientists from the Nazi Party. There were disease manipulations, there were tick research, there's mosquito research, and now we have these mysterious creatures washing up on Long Island that presumably are coming from Plum Island. So, this is stuff that our listeners should be researching on their own. But again, we need to stress that this isn't some wacko group claiming this stuff. This is real history, and this is scary too.
Yeah, it's this is not in the same category as people saying, "Oh, they're flying UFOs at Area 51." As you said, it's pretty common knowledge that experimentation of a highly sensitive nature related to biological warfare takes place on this island. So much so that this is a story that was kind of forgotten about in the media, is that Al-Qaeda attempted to target this island.
Wow.
For the attempts, for the purpose of presumably spreading disease there.
So isn't it fascinating that these rogue terror groups have that knowledge of this island, this kind of remote island that's just tiny off of the coast of Connecticut? When you think that they, how do they get this information? That's what I mean.
It's getting the information. I don't think is that difficult. It's on the island, as I said. It's in public knowledge that experiments like that go on there. It's very close to New York. It's not difficult to find where the island is. But a woman in 2008 named Afia Siddiqui who had links to Al-Qaeda, was arrested for initially for assaulting some federal agents who were trying to question her, and she had notes in her pocket listing details about Plum Island.
Wow.
And singling it out for attack.
Very interesting.
Yeah, she's currently serving 86 years in prison. And according to an article in the Daily Mail, she was considered so valuable that ISIS offered to swap some of their prisoners in exchange for her.
Really?
Yeah, and she was, the notes said that had details about Plum Island with the words "mass casualty attack with a dirty bomb" written on it.
Wow.
So apparently this was in Al-Qaeda's crosshairs for some time. They thought they could do some serious damage to the United States by attacking this island and spreading whatever contagions are contained there. And, I think they're right. If they did manage to hit the island, they could have, God knows what they could have unleashed there. If even half the stories you find about it on the internet are true, there could be pandemics, the likes of which would, could be comparable to the Spanish flu breaking out in the U.S.
Wow. Well, one final note that I wanted to bring up on the Nazi connection, and I think this will dovetail nicely into the Zika virus discussion, but the false flag nation is known for calling out New World Order higher elites, and the Rockefeller name should ring a bell in most of our listeners' minds here. But interestingly enough, the Erich Traub, the Nazi scientist who was brought over to the United States through the Operation Paperclip program, he initially studied in the United States at Princeton University, and he was involved in a fellowship program and specifically targeted for a fellowship program which was provided by the Rockefeller Institute of Medical Research. And you have a connection there between one of the New World Order families and virus research, because that's what Eric studied at Princeton. He studied specifically his foot and mouth research, the disease that he was famous for studying in Germany as well. But also he conducted research on virus manipulation, and some sources are pointing towards that he did some research with ticks as well. So this is all at Princeton University, and his fellowship was financed by the Rockefeller family. So there's another connection between the New World Order power families financing and training literally both sides of potential wars at that time. So
Yeah.
what does that tell you about not only the knowledge of the Rockefeller family, knowing that there would be a conflict between Germany and the United States, and kind of hedging their scientific bets on both sides? I mean, this is just fascinating.
Was this guy brought over was he studying as part of Operation Paperclip, or was this before the war?
This was before the war.
Well,
which is not unheard of. I mean,
yeah, it's some of these very elite figures in the U.S. at the time, like the Bushes, like Prescott Bush, Henry Ford, had a lot of dialogue with the Nazi government. This is in the 30s before the war started, so it was not. Keep in mind that the Nazis hosted the Olympics in 1936. There was a Nazi embassy in the United States up until 1941. So yeah, there were a lot of there was a lot of discussion and communication going back and forth between the Nazi government and the budding eugenics movement in the United States at the time. So yeah, that doesn't surprise me too much. What I think is interesting is that this same organization, the Rockefeller Foundation, a few years later was conducting field research in Africa on yellow fever, and apparently here is where they discovered the Zika virus.
That's correct.
They discovered it on some apes in the Zika forest in some African country. I can't remember where. I think it was the equatorial region. But that's where it was isolated, and you will see that there's an image going online on this website where apparently scientists can order samples of diseases and viruses to experiment on them. Presumably there's a lot of red tape you have to go through to obtain it, but you see samples of Zika virus for sale for $600.
That's
and
correct.
It's patented by the Rockefeller Foundation. The patent goes back to 1947. It's called ATCC VR 84. That's I guess that was the 84th virus that was patented. I believe that's what that means.
This is incredible.
Yeah.
And again, this is public knowledge. This is on the ATCC website.
Yes, American Type Culture Collection.
Yeah, so this is not on Village Citizen or Infowars.com. This is...
not that those are illegitimate news sources. I
right, but
trust them completely.
You get the gist of what I'm saying.
Yes, yes. But, interestingly enough, Zika was patented way back in the late 40s. You never hear a word about it. Suddenly, it explodes back onto the scene in 2015 in South America, a region of the world which generally has pretty high birth rates. And these organizations that are these people, like the Rockefellers, the Bill Gates of the world and everything, are well known for their desire to reduce the world's population to a more manageable number and whatnot. And Zika, which no one even heard of until about 6 months ago, is suddenly responsible for causing all these birth defects in Brazil. And it spread rapidly throughout Latin America. You have the president of El Salvador calling for no pregnancies for 2 years until we can get it contained. Isn't it interesting? Isn't it interesting that this happens here? Or all their interests just co-align. Where this disease outbreaks in a region which has high birth rates, and the calls for
no pregnancy.
Yeah.
Wow.
And
that's incredible.
Yeah, and then you have these quotes by Bill Gates saying, if we do a real good job with vaccinations and reproductive health services, we can reduce we can slow population growth. It's all the threads seem to come together here. It's not conclusively proven that Zika causes the shrunken head, a microcephaly birth defect.
Yeah, the pinhead disease.
Yeah, but that's the impression that is being given in the mainstream media.
So do you think this is a propaganda attempt by world governments to prevent women or instill fear in women about getting pregnant? And this is obviously any woman would be incredibly sensitive to this because they don't want their child to grow up with a disease like this. So would this really be enough to stop people from procreating?
I don't think so, personally.
I don't think so either.
And I'm not convinced that Zika is what's causing this, because Zika, again, has been around for decades. People have known about it, and it's broken out before. There's been breakouts in Southeast Asia and Africa as well. And to my knowledge, based on my research, it did not cause microcephaly over there. So they've known about Zika for almost 60 years, and there was no mention of it being linked to microcephaly in all those years. Just now, there's talk of it being linked to it. I think what's going on is that the microcephaly, there's one of two things. Let me back up for a second. We got ahead of ourselves. These cases of microcephaly began appearing in Brazil. And in Brazil is also where a lot of research with the mosquitoes we talked about earlier are being done. And there's a British biotech company called Oxitec, which has released genetically modified mosquitoes into Brazil as well as the Cayman Islands for the purpose of wiping out the native mosquito population. And the reason they were doing this is because when the genetically modified male mosquitoes mate with the native female mosquitoes, their offspring are sterile, and it will prevent the spread of other diseases like Yucca virus and
malaria.
Yeah, things like that. And apparently it was successful in doing that. It did largely eliminate that. But
that's pretty cool.
Yeah, the speculation is that some of the mosquitoes were able to reproduce anyway, and some of the ones that were modified were female, and they were released as well. And the female mosquitoes are the ones that bite people, not the males. And some people think that the modified mosquitoes have been biting humans, and then that's biting pregnant women, and that's what causes the birth defects in them. So some people think the disease that the mosquitoes are carrying was Zika virus. So there's a lot of things that I think are being conflated here, and I think these mosquitoes are carrying Zika virus. The real question is how they got the virus. Mm-hmm. We've proven there's a lot of links and overlaps between these biotech organizations and Rockefeller foundations, Bill and Melinda Gates foundations, when you look at who's funding all these experiments and research. But I think it's definitely plausible that these mosquitoes are carrying Zika because they were modified by these organizations. The real question in my mind is that's what's causing the birth defects.
Right. Because there have been some other conflicting reports that this is just a cover-up story for a larvicide.
Yeah, like
provided by Monsanto.
Well, I don't know if Monsanto's the one doing it, but they do use incredible amounts of pesticide in Brazil. They use pesticide that are banned in 22 other countries. They use more pesticides than anywhere in the world in Brazil. Wow. And I think what's happening is that the mass use of pesticides is what's causing these birth defects, and people confused correlation with causation.
Mm-hmm.
And there are cases of microcephaly going back to 2012, and I think it was underreported because people didn't know what was causing it, and then suddenly Zika appears, and people think it's that. I think it's possible that this story, the Zika outbreak, was done intentionally to cover up the defects caused by the use of pesticide. I think this is something maybe the government wished they had back when Agent Orange was causing all these problems in Vietnam. They could have just blamed it on a disease. But it's hard to say what's going on because the two stories seem to contradict each other. One is the population control narrative where they release Zika to cause the birth defects.
Right, or scare women.
Yep. Yeah. But then you have this other evidence that says Zika is just happening and it's not actually causing these birth defects. It's the pesticides being released, and they seem to be unfolding at the same time, and people are conflating the two. And maybe there's no relation between the two, but people think there is.
Very interesting stuff here.
In either way, it's massive biotech companies are behind it. It's no matter which version of events you choose to go with.
Yeah, that's correct here. Like you said, it does kind of conflict with the two different theories. Another point that I wanted to get at was that Obama just came out recently, a couple weeks ago, and he asked the federal government for $1.8 billion in funds to fight the Zika virus. Now, this would be both domestically and foreign efforts. So, do you think that we're going to see an increase in the Zika virus hysteria, and this is going to eventually come to a pinnacle, and we'll have counter viruses and treatments available by the U.S. government, and this could cause more types of sterilization in the United States? What do you think is the end goal here, and why do you think Obama is taking this so seriously? That's a lot of money to ask.
Yeah, well, in short, yes, I think this is the media is certainly carrying it away with it, going nuts with this. This is the new pandemic that they, try to make everyone afraid of. Every few years, there's a new one. There was swine flu.
Yeah,
there's avian flu before that. This is just the latest one here, and I think the reason this one has scared people more is because of the link to the, questionable link to birth defects that has been caused. That freaks people out a lot more than just having a cold for a few days.
Right.
As far as the whole, Hegelian dialectic, problem, solution, outcome, I think there's some of that going on too, because you have this disease breakout. Obama puts a team together to develop a vaccine, and last I heard, they're a few weeks away from developing the first trials of a vaccine. So yeah, it does seem a little bit too convenient how there's the action reaction, and then suddenly a vaccine comes out.
Right.
And maybe that goes back to the whole vaccines are used to sterilize people argument. So maybe there's some truth going on there. There's this sort of biological fog of war going on where it's hard to tell what's causing what, and what's disinformation, and what people are confused about, and what have you. So the more you delve into this stuff, the less clear it becomes. It's simpler to stick with the narrative you get on the news.
Yes, I agree with that. Um, you know, obviously this type of weaponization of mosquitoes and ticks and different types of bugs has been proven in the past. And do you think that this is warfare of the future? Do you think that instead of sending, 10,000 feet on the ground in Somalia or something like that, they're just going to send a boat on the shore and release a whole bunch of mosquitoes and play the waiting game? Do you think that's a future of warfare?
If that was being done, and I certainly think probably has been done, it's just has not been knowledge. I think it's going to be like, a black operations type thing carried out by the CIA. They would never publicly admit that's what they're doing or that's how they're fighting a war.
Mm-hmm.
They would be, releasing the disease discreetly on the battlefield. There's stories of swine flu mysteriously outbreaking in Ukraine, where there's pretty credible reports that there are Western intelligence agents active over there. So, I think it will probably be used in warfare, but it will be done covertly. It will not be. You're not going to hear whatever military-industrial cheerleader on Fox News is like, U.S. troops released modified pig flu in to fight Boko Haram. That's not going to happen. It'll be done very discreetly by the CIA or some other agency.
Yeah.
And you'll never hear about it on the news, and it'll be people like us speculating about it. That's pretty much where I see this going in the future. As far as Zika specifically, I think we're going to see a slow fade on Zika.
Yeah.
I think people are just, it's an election year. People are just going to just start fixating on that more and more, at least in the U.S. and probably European media as well. They have their own problems over there, certainly with the migrant crisis and everything. But I think Zika is just going to fade away. I think I lean more towards the theory that this is an elaborate smokescreen to cover up the problems caused by pesticide. And that's a conspiracy in and of itself, right there.
Mm-hmm.
It's not as spectacular as the population reduction one, but it's in its own way, it's just as sinister.
Yeah, you're absolutely right on that. Wow. So this wow. What can I say? This was an eventful podcast, and obviously it hit home for you, being that you are essentially a victim of one of these scientific virus.
Technically, I guess you could say I was a victim of biowarfare by the government, but
yeah.
I got off pretty easy because I didn't even know that I had Lyme antibodies in my body. Some people, apparently it's very debilitating, like they can barely function, get out of bed or anything.
You made out pretty well then.
Yeah, I never even knew I had it. And
Wow.
Had I not just gotten some blood work done where they suspected, it was one of like 20 different tests they ran, so they just threw it in.
Mm-hmm.
Because I guess they figured why not, and it came back for that. But some people get it really bad, and if hopefully we can more concretely prove a link between biological warfare research and things like Lyme disease, and people who are responsible for this will be held accountable, and people who've been infected can get some compensation for it.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Have you considered a potential lawsuit?
I'm reaching out to an attorney. I'm going to see if there's any way I can squeeze money out of this. I believe so. I believe
This is America.
this is the most litigious society in the world. I think we can make
There's a case to be made.
There's a case to be made to make some hot dollars off this. So I will certainly be looking into that. But I think we are just about out of time this week, Will. Anything else you want to add on this topic of weaponization of disease before we sign off here?
Final thoughts are that I think this is the most terrifying reality of our current day. You saw what things like the Spanish flu did in the early 20th century. You saw what the Black Plague did to Europe. I do support government research trying to prevent these types of scenarios. I think that that's a good thing. However, this kind of sinister backdoor research is pretty terrifying. So there needs to be a balance in this area because you don't want to have some sort of outbreak of a human-created virus that's going to kill everybody on the planet just because some scientists got a boner off the idea. So that's
Agreed.
pretty terrifying, and I'll also be adding mosquito netting to my bug out bag. No pun intended.
Good call. Yeah, good call.
So that's my final thoughts, and again, I think we're going to put up some pictures of not only the Montauk monsters, but Plum Island and Old Lyme, Connecticut, so you guys can get a little sense of what exactly we're talking about. So again, let us know what you guys think, and hit us up on the False Flag website, download, comment, and take it away.
Yeah, that's all for this week, folks. Thanks for tuning in. Don't forget to like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter at False Flag Nation, and check out our website for show notes and more. It's www.falseflagnation.com, and subscribe to us on iTunes to get your new episode every week downloaded automatically. That's all for this week. This is Joe DeMarco signing off. Mr. Revere, say goodbye.
All right, adios.
All right, take it easy, people. Thanks.